"Mum, what's inside this blue-berried box?" Rachel Mitchell was exhausted after another impossible week, trying to make the money last until the end of the month. Her 3 young children were running around the yard of the property she had bought for a pittance, her last hope for a fresh start after losing everything when her husband died in a work accident. That's when little Ethan, just 3 years old, came running to her holding a piece of rusty metal. "Mummy, I found something blue buried over there," said the boy, pointing to the corner of the yard where he had started digging to make a vegetable garden. Rachel took a deep breath. 3 weeks ago, she had bought that abandoned lot on the outskirts of East Baltimore in Los Angeles, after the neighbors at the old house where she lived with her children began pressuring the landlord to evict her for late rent. The life insurance money from her husband had run out months ago, and working as a housekeeper wasn't enough to support the family. "Let Mummy see, sweetheart," said Rachel, wiping her hands on the dish towel she carried at her waist. The other 2 children, 4-year-old Daniel and 5-year-old Benjamin, came running too, curious about their younger brother's discovery. Rachel followed the children to the spot where she had begun preparing the soil to plant lettuce and tomatoes. There was a piece of chipped blue metal, clearly part of something larger, buried. "Kids, stay over there on the grass away from Mommy, okay?" Rachel asked, picking up the old shovel she had bought at a thrift store. She began digging carefully around the blue metal. With each movement of the shovel, more parts of the structure appeared. It was a large box, the size of a trunk, completely rusted and painted blue. It must have been there a long time. "Mommy, is it treasure?" asked Benjamin, the oldest, his eyes shining with curiosity. "I don't know, sweetheart. Let's see what it is," Rachel replied, trying not to show the anxiety she felt. After almost an hour of digging, she managed to expose the entire box. It was heavy and had an old lock that was already broken by rust. With some effort, she managed to open the lid. Inside, protected by thick plastic, were several envelopes yellowed with age, some old photographs, and documents that looked official. "What is that, Mommy?" Daniel approached, trying to peek over his mother's shoulder. Rachel carefully picked up one of the envelopes. It was addressed to Harrison Family, 47 Almond Street. The address was exactly where she was now. She opened the envelope and found a deed to the property dated 1987, along with several photos of a family smiling in the same yard where her children now played. "My God," murmured Rachel, flipping through the documents. There were deeds to other properties too, all in the same area. An entire family had lived there decades ago. The photos showed a man, a woman, and 3 children, coincidentally the same ages as her children now. Rachel's heart began to beat faster. Why had that family buried such important documents, and where were they now? "Mommy, are you okay?" Benjamin approached, noticing his mother was different. "Yes, sweetheart. Let's go inside. It's getting late," Rachel said, carefully gathering all the documents. That night, after putting the children to bed, Rachel sat at the kitchen table examining each paper she had found. There were birth certificates, property documents for at least 5 lots in the area, and personal letters written by hand. One of the letters, dated December 1987, caught her attention. "My dear sister, if you are reading this, it is because something has happened to us. The men came again yesterday, saying we have to leave or they will force us to sell for a pittance. Edward is scared. He thinks we should accept and go away. But I can't let our family lose everything our father built. I buried all the important documents in the backyard, under the old mango tree. If you ever come back, know that we never gave up fighting for what's ours." Rachel felt a chill down her spine. That family had gone through problems similar to hers. The difference was they had properties, resources, and now everything was in her hands. The next day, Rachel decided to look for information about the Harrison family in the neighborhood. She knocked on the door of Mrs. Dorothy, an elderly neighbor who had lived in the area for over 40 years. "Hi, Mrs. Dorothy, sorry to bother you. Do you remember a Harrison family that lived on the lot where I am now?" The woman with gray hair adjusted her glasses and made a thoughtful expression. Harrison. Oh yes, I remember. Edward and Margaret. They had 3 boys, if I'm not mistaken, a hard-working family. Edward had a mechanic shop nearby. Do you know what happened to them? Well, dear, it was a very strange thing. One minute they were here, the next they just vanished. This must have been in the late 80s, early 90s. Some men in suits showed up around here, saying the family had sold everything and moved to the countryside. Rachel felt her heart race. And you believed it? At the time I did, but I always thought it was strange afterward. Margaret was very attached to the house, to the neighborhood. She always said she would die here, and the boys were in the local school, had little friends. Why would they just disappear out of nowhere? Do you have any more information about them? Mrs. Dorothy scratched her chin, thoughtful. Look, if you're curious about this, I suggest you talk to Mr. Walter over there in the yellow house on the corner. He was a very good friend of Edward's. They worked together at the shop. If anyone knows anything, it's him. Rachel thanked her and headed to the indicated yellow house. A black man of about 70 was watering plants in the front yard. Mr. Walter? Yes, that's me. What can I do for you? My name is Rachel. I just moved onto the lot where the Harrison family lived. I wanted to know if you have any information about them. The man's face changed completely. He stopped watering the plants and looked at her with suspicion. Why do you want to know? It's just that I found some things buried in the backyard and got curious about what happened to the family. Mr. Walter looked around, as if checking if anyone was listening. Miss, I'm going to give you some advice. Don't mess with this. Leave it alone. That family, it was better that they vanished. What do you mean? Look, Edward was my friend. We worked together for years, but he got into some trouble, owed money to dangerous people. When they vanished, I thought it was for the best. Rachel was not convinced. But the family had properties, important documents. What documents? Mr. Walter asked, now visibly nervous. Deeds, certificates. The man approached her, speaking quietly. Listen here, miss. You have small children, right? Then for their sake, forget this story. Bury everything back and never bring it up again. Rachel left there with more questions than answers. Why did Mr. Walter get so nervous? What really happened to the Harrison family? That afternoon, while the children played in the backyard, Rachel returned to the spot where she had found the box. She began to dig deeper, looking for more traces. To her surprise, she found 2 more smaller boxes, both also carefully buried. The first contained old jewelry and some gold coins. The second had more documents, including bank statements that showed significant financial activity until December of 1987, when they simply stopped. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. That night, Rachel decided to research the Harrison family online. She didn't find much, but she managed to locate a death certificate for Margaret Harrison dated 1995, registered in the city of Sacramento, in the interior of Los Angeles. Cause of death: natural. But if Margaret had died in Sacramento, did that mean the family had really moved? Why then had they buried such important documents before leaving? The next day, Rachel received an unexpected visit. An elegant woman, approximately 50 years old, knocked on her door. Good afternoon, Mrs. Mitchell. Yes, that's me. My name is Jennifer Brooks. I'm a lawyer and I represent the heirs of the Harrison family. We heard that you found some of their belongings on your property. Rachel felt her blood run cold. How did this woman know about the discovery? I'm sorry, but how did you find out about this? Small communities are like that, right? News travels fast. May I come in so we can talk better? Rachel hesitated, but ended up letting the woman in. Jennifer sat in the simple living room and got straight to the point. Mrs. Mitchell, the documents you found legally belong to the heirs of the Harrison family. I am here to recover them on behalf of my clients. Heirs? But I thought the entire family had disappeared. Not all of them. There are distant relatives who have a legal right to the assets. If you cooperate and hand everything over voluntarily, I can guarantee you will receive fair compensation for the trouble. Rachel didn't like the tone of the conversation. And if I don't want to hand them over? Jennifer smiled coldly. Well, Mrs. Mitchell, technically you are in possession of goods that do not belong to you. That could be considered misappropriation. I'm sure a single mother with 3 children wouldn't want legal trouble, right? Rachel's heart raced. She couldn't afford to have problems with the law. How much are you offering? $5,000 for the return of everything. It's a fair amount, considering the documents have no real value to you. $5,000 would mean a few months of peace for Rachel, but something about that woman's demeanor deeply troubled her. I need to think about it. Of course, but don't take too long. My clients are eager to resolve this matter. I'll be back tomorrow for your answer. After Jennifer left, Rachel felt uneasy. She decided to call a cousin who worked as an accountant and knew some basic legal matters. Tony, I need your help. If I find documents buried on my land, are they mine or do they belong to the original family? It depends, cuz. If you bought the land legally and the documents were buried a long time ago, they're probably yours by right. But it's best to find a real lawyer to guide you properly. Do you know any affordable lawyers? I know Attorney Thompson here downtown. He doesn't charge much for the first consultation. Do you want his number? The next day, before Jennifer returned, Rachel went to Attorney Thompson's office. He was a lawyer of about 60 with a small office in the city center. Dr. Mitchell, from what you've told me, I need to see the documents to assess the legal situation. But I can say up front that if you bought the land legally, everything on it became your property. Rachel showed some of the documents she had found. The lawyer examined everything carefully. Wow, these are property deeds for the east side. If they're authentic, they're worth a lot of money these days. The area has appreciated a lot in recent years. So they really are mine? Legally, yes, but there's a catch. If legitimate heirs of the original family come forward, they could challenge it in court. The process would be long and expensive. And what about this lawyer who showed up at my house offering money? Attorney Thompson raised an eyebrow. What kind of lawyer goes to people's homes offering money like that, without even being sure of the facts? That smells like a scam to me. Do you have her card? Rachel showed the card that Jennifer had left. The attorney picked up the phone and dialed the number. Hello, I'd like to speak with Attorney Jennifer Brooks. What do you mean? No lawyer by that name works there. Rachel felt a chill in her stomach. Attorney Thompson, what does this mean? It means you were almost deceived. This woman is a con artist. She probably found out about the discovery and wanted to take advantage of the situation. That afternoon, when Jennifer returned to Rachel's house, she was prepared. So, Mrs. Mitchell, what's your decision? I've decided not to hand over the documents. Jennifer's expression changed completely. You're making a serious mistake. My clients won't like this at all. Your clients, or you yourself? Because I found out there's no attorney with your name at the firm on the card you gave me. Jennifer became visibly nervous. This is a misunderstanding. The misunderstanding is you thinking you can fool me. Please leave my property. After Jennifer left, Rachel felt relieved but also worried. If a con artist had appeared so quickly, it meant more people knew about the found documents. In the late afternoon, Mr. Walter appeared at Rachel's door. He seemed agitated. Miss, I need to talk to you. It's about the Harrisons. Rachel invited him in. He sat down and took a deep breath before starting to speak. I lied to you before. Edward didn't owe money to anyone dangerous. In fact, it was the opposite. What do you mean? Edward had discovered some irregularities with a big construction company that was buying land in the area for very low prices. They pressured families, threatened them, until they managed to buy the properties for a pittance. Rachel leaned forward, interested. And then, Edward gathered evidence, documents that showed how they operated. He was going to report everything, but before he could, the family disappeared. Disappeared or were forced to leave. I think they were threatened and had to flee in a hurry. That's why they buried the documents. It was the only way to protect the evidence and their rights to the properties. Rachel felt a shiver. And does the construction company still exist? It exists and is one of the largest in the city nowadays. If those documents you found prove what I think they prove, it could be very dangerous for you. What kind of danger? The same kind that made the Harrison family disappear. That night Rachel could barely sleep. She took all the documents and stored them in a small suitcase she hid under the bed. The next day, she took the children to school and returned home determined to investigate more about the construction company Mr. Walter had mentioned. Researching online, she discovered that Anderson Construction and Associates was indeed one of the largest in the eastern region of Los Angeles. It had been founded in 1985, and its growth had been meteoric in the 90s, exactly the period when the Harrison family disappeared. Rachel decided to visit some older neighbors to find out if anyone else had gone through situations similar to the Harrison family. The third house she visited belonged to a lady named Evelyn, who had lived on the street for over 50 years. The Harrison family? Of course I remember, but they weren't the only ones who suddenly vanished back then. What do you mean? There were at least 5 families who sold their houses very cheaply and moved away out of nowhere, all in the same period, between 87 and 90. Do you remember the names? There were the Johnsons, from down the street, the Williamses, from the corner, Mr. John the carpenter's family. They all left at once, sold for prices that made no sense. And who bought the houses? Always the same construction company, Anderson, if I'm not mistaken. Rachel was beginning to understand the scale of the problem. It wasn't just about the Harrison family, but a much larger scheme. Mrs. Evelyn, did you ever think about reporting this? Dear, report what? Back then there was no internet, none of today's conveniences. And who would believe a bunch of poor people saying a big construction company was doing something wrong? Rachel went home with her mind racing. She spent the rest of the day organizing all the documents she had found, trying to understand how they connected to the story she was uncovering. Among the papers, she found something she hadn't seen before, a handwritten list with names and addresses. Next to each name there were notes like sold 03-15-87, moved out 08-22-88, no deal, investigate. The Harrison family's name was on the list, with the note no deal, apply more pressure. Rachel felt her heart race. That was proof that Mr. Walter was right. The Harrison family had been targeted for refusing to sell their properties. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The next day, Rachel received a strange call in the middle of the afternoon. Hello, Mrs. Mitchell. Yes, who is this? Someone who is interested in the documents you found. I can guarantee they're worth much more than that $5,000 they offered you before. Rachel froze. How did this person know about Jennifer's offer? Who are you? That doesn't matter now. What matters is I can pay $50,000 for the documents. In cash. The amount was tempting. $50,000 would completely change the lives of Rachel and the children. Why are they worth so much? Let's just say there are people willing to pay a very high price to keep certain information from coming to light. You have until tomorrow to decide. The call ended abruptly. Rachel was left trembling. $50,000 was more money than she had ever seen in her life, but the situation was becoming too dangerous. She decided to call Attorney Thompson and tell him about the call. Dr. Mitchell, you need to come here urgently and bring all the documents. In the lawyer's office, Rachel told him about the mysterious call and showed the list of names she had found. My God, this here is proof of a systematic intimidation scheme. Look here. Apply more pressure, investigate. These are criminal practices. Attorney Thompson, I'm scared. I have 3 small children. You have every reason to be scared, but you also hold in your hands something that can bring justice to a lot of people. These families who were forced out of their homes deserve restitution. But how do I do that without putting myself at risk? The lawyer thought for a few moments. There is a way. We'll file a formal complaint with the prosecutor's office, reporting the entire scheme. With this evidence, they'll have to investigate, and once everything is official, no one will want to harm you because that would only draw more attention to the case. Rachel wasn't fully convinced. What if they try to threaten me before that? That's why we need to act fast. Today. They went straight to the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor who assisted them, Prosecutor Michael Davis, was impressed with the documents presented. This is very serious. If true, we're talking about criminal conspiracy, intimidation, possible document forgery. I'll open an investigation immediately. Prosecutor Michael, Mrs. Mitchell is worried about her safety and her children's, explained Attorney Thompson. Rightfully so. I'll request temporary police protection while we investigate, and I'll issue official requests to all competent authorities today. From now on, anything that happens to Mrs. Mitchell will be investigated within this context. Rachel felt a bit safer, but was still apprehensive when she returned home in the late afternoon. The children ran to hug her when she arrived. Benjamin, the oldest, asked, "Mummy, why are you sad?" "I'm not sad, sweetie. I'm just tired." "Is it because of the box we found?" Rachel was surprised by her son's perception. "Why do you think that?" "Because ever since you found those things, you've been nervous all the time." Rachel crouched down and hugged her 3 children. "Mommy is trying to sort out some important things, but I don't want you to worry, okay?" That night, after putting the children to sleep, Rachel kept thinking about everything that had happened in the last few days. In less than a week, her life had completely changed. She, who had only been worried about planting a garden to save money at the supermarket, now found herself in the middle of a criminal investigation. The phone rang around 10 at night. "Hello? Mrs. Mitchell, last chance. $100,000 for the documents. If you don't accept, you'll regret it." "Who are you? Why don't you identify yourself?" "You don't need to know who I am. You just need to know I'm not someone to be messed with. I've already handed everything over to the prosecutor's office. Even if I wanted to, I can't do anything anymore." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "That was a very stupid decision, Mrs. Mitchell. A very stupid one indeed." The call ended, and Rachel was terrified. She checked that all the doors and windows were locked and spent the night almost without sleeping. The next day, she was visited by 2 detectives who introduced themselves as investigators assigned by the prosecutor's office. "Mrs. Mitchell, we've come to check your security conditions and install some protective devices." They installed a panic button connected directly to the emergency dispatch center and a basic alarm system. They also briefed Rachel on security procedures. "Anything strange, any suspicious person, you press the button immediately," instructed Detective Stephen. "And my children? We'll speak with their school's administration. No one but you can pick them up without express authorization." That afternoon, Rachel was in the backyard when she saw a black car parked in front of her house. 2 men in suits were observing the property. She discreetly activated the panic button and went inside with the children. In less than 5 minutes, a patrol car arrived. The men in the black car left quickly before the police got there. "Mrs. Mitchell, were you able to see their faces?" asked one of the officers. "Not very well, but they were 2 middle-aged men, one tall and dark-haired, the other shorter and bald. We'll increase patrols on your street." That night, Rachel received a call from Prosecutor Michael. "Mrs. Mitchell, we have news about the investigation. We managed to locate 2 of the families listed in the documents you found." "Are they still alive?" "Yes, they are, and they confirmed everything. They were intimidated and forced to sell their properties for values well below market price. We also obtained documents from that time that prove the irregularities." Rachel felt a mix of relief and apprehension. "And now?" "Now we're going to deepen the investigation. Anderson Construction and Associates will be summoned to provide explanations. And there's more. We discovered that the current owner of the company is Richard Anderson, son of the founder." "Is that important?" "Very. Richard Anderson is currently a city councilman and has larger political ambitions. A scandal like this could end his career." Rachel began to understand why there was so much interest in silencing her. "Attorney Michael, won't this make the situation more dangerous for me?" "Actually, it's the opposite. The more public this case becomes, the safer you will be. Powerful people like Richard Anderson don't make foolish moves when they're being closely watched." The next day, Rachel woke to the sound of cars on the street. Looking out the window, she saw several police vehicles and cars from the prosecutor's office. There were also journalists and TV cameras. Detective Stephen knocked on her door. "Mrs. Mitchell, sorry for the disturbance. We're conducting an operation in the area, executing search and seizure warrants related to the case. At the construction company's offices, at the construction company, at Richard Anderson's house, and other locations. You'll need to stay home today for safety." Rachel spent the day watching the news on television. The case had gained national attention. "Operation Clean Plot dismantles real estate intimidation scheme," read the headline on a news broadcast. The children were excited seeing their house on TV, not fully understanding what was happening. "Mommy, why is our house on television?" asked Ethan, the youngest. "Because Mommy helped uncover something very important, sweetheart." In the afternoon, attorney Michael called with more news. Mrs. Mitchell, we found a lot in the construction company's offices. Documents proving the intimidation scheme, lists of targeted properties, even records of payments to intimidators. And Councilman Richard Anderson? He's been temporarily arrested. We're already investigating his involvement in the scheme, even if it was through the family business. Rachel felt enormous relief. Does this mean the danger is over? It's still too early to say that categorically, but the situation has completely changed in your favor. With all this attention, no one will want to mess with you. That night, Rachel slept better than she had in weeks. The next day, she received an unexpected visit. It was a woman of about 60, accompanied by a man the same age. Mrs. Mitchell, my name is Rose Johnson. This is my husband, Anthony. Our family was on the list you found. Rachel invited them in. We came to thank you, Rose continued. For years we lived with a feeling of injustice, knowing we were robbed of our home. When we saw on TV that someone had finally managed to prove what happened to us, Rose began to cry. Anthony placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. You can't imagine what it meant for us to know we weren't crazy, that we really were victims of a scheme. How are you living now? Rachel asked. We've been paying rent for over 20 years. The money we received for the house at the time was barely enough to buy a small apartment in the countryside. If we had kept our original home, today it would be worth at least $500,000. Rachel was moved by the couple's story. And now can you sue the construction company? That's exactly what we're going to do. Attorney Thompson is already handling our case too. In the following days, other families appeared at Rachel's house with similar stories. They had all been harmed by the same scheme, and now had hope for justice. A week after the police operation, Rachel received a call from attorney Michael with an unexpected proposal. Mrs. Mitchell, Richard Anderson's defense wants to make a deal. What kind of deal? They want to prevent the case from going to trial. They're offering compensation to all the harmed families, including you. How much? For you specifically, $200,000. For the other families, amounts proportional to the losses they suffered. Rachel was silent for a few moments. $200,000 would completely change her life and her children's. What if I accept? Richard Anderson will resign from his city council seat and permanently step away from public life. The construction company will be heavily fined and have to repair all the damages. It's a significant victory. But he won't go to jail. Probably not. With the plea deal, he'll get community service as an alternative sentence. Rachel was torn between the need for the money and the desire to see full justice served. Can I talk to the other families before deciding? Of course. In fact, it would be good if you all decided together. Rachel organized a meeting at her house with all the families involved. There were 15 people representing 8 different families who had been harmed by the scheme. Everyone, you've heard the proposal, Rachel began. I need to know everyone's opinion before giving an answer. Mr. Anthony Johnson was the first to speak. Look, Rachel, I'm 70 years old. My wife is 68. The compensation they're offering us will allow us to buy our own house again and live our final years with dignity. To me, that's worth more than seeing the guy in jail. Mrs. Rose agreed with her husband. Justice for me is being able to get back what was taken from us. If I can get that without having to fight in court for years, even better. Others expressed similar opinions. In the end, they decided to accept the deal unanimously. 2 weeks later, Rachel signed the settlement documents at the prosecutor's office. Along with the compensation, she also received the definitive deeds to 2 properties that were registered in the Harrison family's name, but which legally now belong to her by right of purchase of the land where they were found. Mrs. Mitchell, said Prosecutor Michael Davis during the signing, you did something very few people would have the courage to do. You faced powerful people to seek justice not only for yourself, but for several families. Rachel smiled, but she was thinking of other things. Prosecutor Davis, I wanted to know, were you able to find out what really happened to the Harrison family? Yes, we were. They were indeed intimidated and forced to flee in a hurry in December 1987. We managed to trace them to Sacramento, where they lived under false identities until they died of natural causes in the 90s. And their children? That's the most interesting part. One of the children, the youngest, was adopted by a local family before the escape. He is still alive and lives here in Los Angeles. Rachel felt her heart race. Does he know the story? He didn't, but he has been informed. In fact, he would like to meet you. What do you mean? Well, technically he is the legitimate heir to part of the Harrison family assets, but considering you were the one who had the courage to fight for justice, he wants to split everything 50-50. Rachel couldn't believe what she was hearing. He wants to meet me? Yes, in fact, he works at City Hall in the Social Services Department. His name is James Robert Harrison Mitchell. When he learned the whole story, he was very moved. The next day, Rachel met James Robert in a downtown cafe. He was a man of about 40, with dark hair and kind eyes. "Rachel, I don't even know how to thank you for what you did," were his first words. "I grew up always feeling incomplete, knowing I had a family that disappeared when I was a child." "Do you remember anything?" "Very little. I remember my mother's face playing in the backyard. When I saw the photos you found, many memories came back." James showed Rachel some old photos he had kept. "This here is the only photo I had of my original family. See how similar it is to the ones you found." Rachel compared the photos. It was unmistakably the same family. "James, I want to split everything 50-50 as you suggested. I don't feel entitled to keep things that belong to your family. Rachel, you had the courage to fight when no one else would. If it were up to me, the documents would stay buried forever. You deserve to share in the benefits of this fight." The two decided to become partners in managing the inherited assets. James, with his experience at City Hall, would handle the bureaucratic aspects. Rachel, with her determination and courage, would handle the strategic decisions. With the compensation money and the value of the recovered properties, Rachel decided to start a small business, a support center for single mothers in the region. The place would offer vocational courses, daycare for the children, and basic legal guidance. James suggested that part of the properties be turned into affordable housing for low-income families. "Rachel, our families suffered from a lack of opportunities. How about we create opportunities for other families?" The idea pleased Rachel completely. 6 months after the first day she dug up the backyard, Rachel was at the inauguration of the Mother Hope Support Center, named in honor of Margaret Harrison, James's mother. Her children were playing in the yard next door, in the very spot where it all began. More than 50 families from the region were present at the inauguration. Mrs. Rose and Mr. Anthony, who had used their compensation to buy their own home, were also there. "Rachel," said Mrs. Rose, "when you knocked on our door that day, you changed our lives forever." James gave an emotional speech during the inauguration. This center exists because a courageous woman decided not to accept injustice. Rachel could have stayed quiet. She could have accepted the first money they offered, but she chose to fight for what was right. Rachel, watching her 3 children playing happily, thought about how life can change in unexpected ways. Less than a year ago, she was desperate, not knowing how to support them. Now she had not only achieved financial stability, but had also brought justice to several families and created opportunities for others. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. 2 years after the discovery of the buried boxes, Rachel was in her office at the Mother Hope Center when she received an unexpected call. "Hello, Rachel Mitchell?" "Yes, who's speaking?" "My name is Mr. Paul Anderson. I'm an investigative journalist. I'd like to do a story about your history for a national magazine." "A story?" "Yes, your case has become a national reference for combating irregular real estate schemes. The prosecutor's office has already used your case as a model to investigate similar situations in other cities." Rachel was surprised. She didn't know her story had gained such wide attention. "What kind of story?" "We want to tell your complete journey, from the moment you found the documents to the creation of the support center. It's a story of courage and determination that can inspire other people." Rachel agreed to do the story, but asked that the focus be on the families who had been helped, not just on her. The story was published 3 months later on the cover of a nationally circulated magazine with the title, "The Woman Who Unearthed Injustice." The 6-page report told the whole story and included testimonies from the helped families. The impact was enormous. Rachel began receiving calls from people all over the country, reporting similar situations. Some managed to resolve their problems using her story as a legal reference. James suggested they create an NGO to guide people going through similar situations. Rachel, your story proved that it's possible to face powerful people when you're in the right. How about we help others do the same? The NGO Buried Justice was created on the 3rd anniversary of the discovery of the documents. The goal was to guide people who suspected irregularities in old real estate transactions. During the NGO's launch event, Rachel gave a speech that moved everyone. 3 years ago, I was just a desperate mother trying to plant a vegetable garden to save money at the supermarket. When I hit that buried blue box, I never imagined I was unearthing not just documents, but also the hope for justice for several families. I learned that sometimes life places responsibilities in our hands that we didn't ask for, but that can change the fate of many people. We all have the ability to make a difference, even when we think we're too small to do so. James added, Rachel taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid, but about doing what's right despite the fear. She could have stayed quiet, she could have accepted the money and closed the matter, but she chose to fight, not just for herself, but for people she didn't even know. At the end of the event, Mrs. Rose approached Rachel. My dear, you saved our family from bitterness. For 20 years, Anthony and I lived resentful, not understanding why we were treated with such injustice. Today we have our own home again, and more importantly, we have the certainty that we weren't to blame for anything. 5 years after the discovery, Rachel was organizing the NGO's files when she found the first letter she had read from Margaret Harrison. She reread the words, If you are reading this, it's because something happened to us. I buried all the important documents in the backyard, under the old mango tree. If you ever return, know that we never gave up fighting for what is ours. Rachel smiled, thinking that, in a way, Margaret had achieved her goal. Even decades later, justice had been done. James entered the office at that moment. Rachel, I have good news. The bill we proposed based on our case was approved by the City Council. Now there's a specific law that protects people who report irregular real estate schemes. That's wonderful. It means other people will have more security to report situations like ours. Exactly. And there's more. The state governor wants to invite us to participate in a state commission on land regularization. Rachel thought for a few moments. James, when all this started, I just wanted to have enough money to support my children. I never imagined our fight could influence state laws. That's how big changes happen, Rachel. They start with small, courageous actions by ordinary people. That afternoon, Rachel went to pick up the children from school. Benjamin, now 10 years old, Daniel with 9, and Ethan with 8, were growing up in an environment completely different from what she had imagined years ago. Mom, said Benjamin on the way home, the teacher said you're a heroine. Rachel laughed. The teacher exaggerated, sweetie. But you helped a lot of families, right? Yes, Uncle James and I helped. When I grow up, I want to help people like you do. Rachel felt her heart warm. Perhaps the greatest result of the whole struggle wasn't the money or the recognition, but the example she was setting for her children about doing the right thing. Arriving home, they found James waiting at the door with a serious expression. Rachel, I need to talk to you. It's about Richard Anderson. The children went to play in the backyard, while the two talked in the living room. What happened? He wants to meet with us, Rachel was surprised. After all these years? It seems he's going through personal problems and wants to apologize in person. His attorney called this morning. Rachel didn't know what to think. And do you think we should accept? I think so. He fulfilled all the clauses of the agreement, paid the compensations, never got involved in politics again. Maybe it's important for him to be able to move on. And for us? For us it could be important too, to close this chapter for good. They scheduled the meeting for the following week at Attorney Thompson's office. Richard Anderson arrived punctually. He looked noticeably different from the powerful man who appeared in the old photos. He seemed thinner, with graying hair and a tired expression. Rachel, James, thank you for agreeing to meet with me, he began. "I know I don't deserve your attention, but I needed to do this." Rachel observed him carefully. She didn't feel anger, only curiosity about what he had to say. "For the last 5 years, I've lived with the weight of what I did and what my family did before me. I lost my political career, I lost friends, I almost lost my family. But the worst of all was realizing how many people were harmed by our construction company's dealings." Richard paused, visibly emotional. "Rachel, you had the courage to do something I never did. Confront what was wrong, even knowing it would be difficult. I always knew our company's methods were unethical, but I chose to ignore it because it was easier." "Why are you telling us this now?" James asked. "Because I want to ask for forgiveness, but mainly because I want to help." Rachel and James looked at each other, surprised. "Help how?" "I have information about other similar schemes that operated at the time, companies that copied our methods in other regions. If you want, I can help you investigate those cases too." Rachel was silent for a few moments. It was hard to believe that the man who had caused so much suffering now wanted to help. "Richard, why should we trust you?" "You shouldn't. But you can verify everything I say. I have documents, names, addresses, everything that can help other families get justice like you did." James leaned forward, interested. "What kind of information?" "I know of at least 3 other companies that used methods similar to ours in cities in Greater Los Angeles. One of them is still active and doing the same things today." Rachel felt a mix of indignation and opportunity. "Would you hand this information over to the authorities?" "I already have. I went to the prosecutor's office last week and gave them everything I knew. But I wanted to offer help to you too, since you have experience dealing with this type of situation." "And what do you get out of this?" "Perhaps a little peace of mind. I know I can't undo the harm we caused, but I can help prevent other people from going through the same thing." Rachel looked at James, who made a gesture indicating the decision was hers. "Richard, we'll accept your help, but with conditions. Any information you provide will be independently verified, and if we discover you're trying to deceive or manipulate us in any way, we'll report that too." "I completely accept. In fact, I prefer it that way. Total transparency." From that day on, Richard became an irregular collaborator with the Buried Justice NGO. His information led to the discovery of at least 15 families who had been harmed by similar schemes in other cities. 6 months later, Rachel was in court, following the trial of one of the companies Richard had reported. Once again, justice was being served for families who had been harmed decades ago. During a break in the hearing, James approached. "Rachel, do you realize how our story keeps bearing fruit? Sometimes I still can't believe everything that happened. It feels like just yesterday I was digging in the backyard just wanting to plant lettuce. And now you're helping plant justice in the lives of dozens of families." Rachel smiled at the metaphor. "You know what impresses me the most, James? How something so small like finding a buried box can turn into something so big. It's because you had the courage not to ignore what you found. Most people would have reburied everything and pretended they never saw anything. Sometimes I still have nightmares about what could have happened if things had gone wrong. But they didn't go wrong. And you know why? Because you made the right choices at every difficult moment." That evening, Rachel was at home helping Benjamin with his history homework. The theme was citizenship and social participation. "Mummy, can I use our story as an example in my paper?" "Of course, sweetie. But don't go overboard praising your mum, okay?" "Why not? You really helped a lot of people." "I helped, but the most important thing is that you 3 understand that anyone can make a difference. You don't need to be rich, famous, or powerful. You just need to have the courage to do what's right." Daniel, who was drawing at the table next to them, looked up. "Mommy, when I grow up, will I find buried treasures too?" Rachel laughed. "The most important treasure you can find is your own ability to help other people, my love." Ethan, the youngest, who was playing on the floor, said, "Mommy, you're better than cartoon heroes." "Why, sweetie?" "Because cartoon heroes are make-believe. You're real." Rachel was moved by her youngest son's innocence and sincerity. 10 years after the discovery of the buried boxes, Rachel was preparing a report on the results of the Buried Justice NGO. The numbers were impressive. 127 families had obtained some form of redress for old real estate irregularities, with a total of $2.3 million in secured compensation. James entered the office with exciting news. "Rachel, I just got a call from the State University. They want you to give a lecture in the law course about citizenship and access to justice." "A lecture at State? I didn't even finish high school, James." "That's exactly why it's important. You'll show future lawyers that justice isn't just a technical matter, but mainly a matter of courage." Rachel agreed to give the lecture. On the scheduled day, the auditorium was packed with more than 300 law students. "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Mitchell, and 10 years ago I was just a single mother trying to survive with 3 young children. Today I'm here because I decided not to ignore an injustice when it appeared in my life." Rachel told the whole story, from the first day digging in the backyard to the NGO's current results. At the end, she opened the floor for questions. A student raised his hand. "Mrs. Rachel, weren't you afraid of the consequences when you decided to report the scheme?" "I was very afraid, but I realized that if I did nothing, other families would continue to be harmed. The fear of being complicit was greater than the fear of the consequences." A student asked, "How do you think we, future lawyers, can help people like you?" "Be accessible. Most people who need legal help don't have money to pay expensive fees. But most importantly, don't underestimate the ability of ordinary people to understand and fight for their rights." After the lecture, several students approached to ask more questions and congratulate Rachel. One of them said, "Mrs. Rachel, your story inspired me to pursue real estate law to help people going through similar situations." Moments like these made Rachel realize that the impact of her struggle would continue to multiply through other people. 2 weeks after the lecture at State, Rachel received an unexpected call. "Hello, Rachel Mitchell?" "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Caroline Anderson. I'm the granddaughter of the founder of Anderson Construction and Associates." Rachel grew tense. She hadn't expected any more contact from the Anderson family after so many years. "What do you want with me?" "I'd like to speak in person. It's about something I recently discovered that may interest you." Rachel hesitated, but her curiosity got the better of her. "About what?" "I'd prefer not to discuss it over the phone. Can I meet you tomorrow?" They arranged to meet at the NGO's office. Caroline Anderson was a woman of about 35, elegant but with a humble demeanor. "Rachel, thank you for seeing me. I know our family caused you and many others a great deal of suffering." Rachel observed the woman carefully, trying to understand her intentions. "Go on." "Recently, my grandfather passed away and left a letter to be opened only by me. In the letter, he confesses everything about the company's irregular methods and specifically mentions the Harrison family case." Rachel leaned forward, interested. "What did he say in the letter?" "That he could never forget what they did to that family. He said the Harrison family was right to resist, that they were indeed the rightful owners of far more properties than we were able to uncover at the time." "More properties?" "Yes. My grandfather wrote that they had deeds for at least 10 properties in the region, but our company only managed to locate 5 back then." Rachel felt her heart race. After all these years, there could still be more discoveries. "And where would these other deeds be?" "We don't know, but my grandfather left some clues in the letter. He mentioned that the Harrison family had a secondary hiding place besides the spot where you found the first documents." "A second hiding place?" "Yes. According to my grandfather, before fleeing, the family scattered their documents in at least 2 different locations as a precaution." Rachel thought about the property where she lived. She had explored every inch after the first discovery, but perhaps she hadn't looked in the right place. "Caroline, why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to make amends as much as possible for our family's mistakes. If there are more properties that rightfully belong to James, he deserves to know." Rachel immediately called James and told him about the conversation with Carolyn. "James, do you remember any other details from your childhood that might indicate where your parents would hide documents?" James thought for a few moments. "Actually, I vaguely remember my father always talking about the safe place under the ground. I was very young and thought it was just a game, but maybe it was real." "What kind of place?" I don't know. A cellar, a basement, something underground. Rachel had an idea. James, what if we go back to the original property and search more carefully? After all these years, maybe we'll see things that went unnoticed before. The next day, Rachel, James, and Caroline met on the property where it all began. The place looked very different now. Part had been turned into the Mother Hope Support Centre, part into affordable housing. Let's start with the area that hasn't been disturbed, suggested James. They spent the entire day searching, digging in various spots. When it was getting dark and they were about to give up, Rachel noticed something strange near the old foundation of a demolished building. Everyone, come look at this. There was a small depression in the ground, as if something had given way beneath the earth. They began to dig and, about a meter deep, found a partially collapsed concrete structure. It looks like it was some kind of underground shelter, observed James. Inside the structure, protected by several layers of plastic, they found another metal box, smaller than the previous ones, but equally important. Rachel opened the box carefully. Inside were more documents, including property deeds that had never appeared before, and a letter specifically addressed to whoever finds this in the future. James opened the letter and read aloud, "If you are reading this letter, it means our family was unable to return to retrieve our documents. We hope whoever finds them will use this information to seek justice, not just for us, but for all families being persecuted by the same methods. Edward and Margaret Harrison, December 1987. The new documents revealed that the Harrison family owned 12 properties in the region, not just the 5 that had been discovered previously. James, said Rachel, this means you have rights to many more properties. And it also means, added Caroline, that our company caused even more damage than we imagined. James looked at the documents with a thoughtful expression. Do you know what I think we should do with this? What? Asked Rachel and Caroline simultaneously. Create a permanent fund to help families who have gone through similar situations. I don't want to get rich from this. I want these assets to serve in repairing historical injustices. Rachel smiled. After so many years working with James, she wasn't surprised by his generosity. It's a wonderful idea. We can create a fund managed by the NGO. Caroline offered to help with the legal documentation and even contribute financially to the fund. It's the way I found to try to make up for my family's mistakes, she explained. 6 months later, the Edward and Margaret Harrison Foundation was officially created. With the resources from the newly discovered properties, the fund began offering free legal assistance and financial support for families fighting real estate irregularities. During the foundation's creation ceremony, Rachel gave an emotional speech. 12 years ago, when I found the first buried box, I thought I had found a solution to my family's problems. Today I realize I found something much greater. The opportunity to be part of a chain of justice that never ends. Every family we help becomes able to help other families. Every young lawyer we inspire will inspire other young people. Every person who decides not to turn a blind eye to an injustice multiplies our fight. James added, My parents, Edward and Margaret, never imagined that the documents they buried so carefully would become seeds for such a large movement. They only wanted to protect what was theirs, but they ended up protecting the rights of hundreds of families they didn't even know. At the end of the ceremony, Rachel was talking with some guests when a young woman approached. Mrs. Rachel, my name is Jessica. I'm a law student. My family was one of the first you helped 5 years ago. Of course I remember. How are you all? We're doing great. We got our house back and my mother started a small business. But the most important thing is that your story inspired me to study law. I'm in my final year now and I want to work with you when I graduate. Rachel was moved. It would be wonderful to have you on the team, Jessica. Actually, I've already convinced 3 more classmates from college to follow the same path. We all want to work in real estate rights and help people like you helped us. This was exactly the kind of multiplication Rachel had always dreamed of. Every transformed life became a new force to transform other lives. 15 years after the first discovery, Rachel was at home preparing dinner when her 3 sons arrived from college. Benjamin was studying law, Daniel was studying architecture, and Ethan was studying social work. "Mum," said Benjamin, "today our civil law professor used your case as an example of fighting for property rights. And my urban planning professor," added Daniel, talked about how the Mother Hope Support Center became a model for participatory urban revitalization. Ethan added, "Our public policy professor said the Buried Justice NGO is a national reference for access to justice for vulnerable populations." Rachel smiled, serving dinner for the three of them. "And how do you feel being the sons of the woman who unearthed injustice?" "Proud," answered Benjamin, "especially because you never let it go to your head." "It's true," agreed Daniel. "You're still the same simple person as always, only now you help hundreds of families." Ethan, always the most emotional, said, "Mum, sometimes I think about how different our lives would be if you had given up that first day." "We probably would have been fine too, dear. What's important is that we managed to help other people along the way." After dinner, Rachel went to her home office to finish an annual report for the NGO. The numbers were still impressive. In 15 years, they had helped 347 families recover property rights, secured over $5.2 million in compensation, and inspired the creation of municipal and state laws protecting whistleblowers of real estate irregularities. But the numbers that made Rachel most proud were others. 23 young lawyers had chosen to work with grassroots property rights after learning her story. 8 similar NGOs had been created in other cities using her model, and 156 people had reported that her story inspired them to report injustices in their own communities. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Hello, Rachel Mitchell." "Yes, who's speaking?" "My name is Ellen Victoria Vincent. I'm a documentary producer. I'd like to talk about the possibility of making a documentary about your story." Rachel sighed. Over the years, she had received several similar proposals. "Look, Ellen, I appreciate the interest, but I don't have much time for these things. And honestly, I think I've talked about this story many times already." "I understand, Mrs. Rachel, but this documentary would be different. We want to focus not only on your story, but on the impact it had on the lives of all the families you helped. It would be a way to show how an ordinary person can truly change society." Rachel became interested. "How would that work?" "We'll interview the families who benefited, the young lawyers you inspired, the authorities who changed procedures because of the case. We want to show the domino effect your courage created. And what would be the goal of the documentary? To inspire other people not to be passive when they witness injustice, to show that you don't need to be special to make a difference, you just need to have courage." Rachel spoke with James, and together they decided to accept participating in the documentary. The filming lasted 6 months. The crew interviewed dozens of people whose lives had been directly or indirectly impacted by Rachel's story. The result was a 90-minute documentary that premiered at film festivals and was later shown in theaters across the country. On the opening day in Los Angeles, Rachel was nervous. The theater was packed with over 400 people present. When the lights dimmed and the documentary began, Rachel was moved to see her story told in such a complete and touching way. The film not only showed her struggle, but revealed how small, courageous acts can create waves of transformation that spread far beyond what we imagine. At the end of the screening, the audience gave a standing ovation for 5 minutes. During the following debate, a woman in the audience raised her hand. "Mrs. Rachel, after watching the documentary, what advice would you give to someone who is facing an injustice but is afraid to fight?" Rachel thought for a few moments before answering, "I would say that fear is natural and even healthy. It makes us think twice before making important decisions. But don't let the fear of acting be greater than the fear of not acting, because when we do nothing in the face of an injustice, it grows and affects more people. And most importantly, you don't have to fight alone. Seek allies, seek guidance, seek support. I would never have achieved anything if it weren't for Attorney Thompson, for Michael, for the District Attorney's Office. Strength comes from unity." A young man in the audience asked, "Mrs. Rachel, if you could go back in time, would you do anything differently?" "Perhaps I would have sought help earlier. I spent a long time trying to solve everything alone, afraid to trust people. But in the end, It was the people who helped me that made everything possible. After the event, many people approached Rachel to share their own stories of injustice and ask for advice. A woman around 50 years old said, "Mrs. Rachel, my family lost our home in a situation similar to yours 10 years ago. After watching the documentary, I decided I'm going to look for a lawyer to investigate the case." A young man commented, "Mrs. Rachel, I was unemployed and discouraged about everything. Your story made me realize I can use my difficulties as motivation to help other people. I'm going to apply to study law next year." Moments like these reaffirmed for Rachel that her fight had been worth it, not only for the direct results, but mainly for the inspiration it generated in others. 20 years after the first discovery, Rachel was sitting on the backyard bench where it had all begun. The location now housed the Mother Hope Support Center, which had expanded and served more than 200 families per month. Her 3 children, now adults, had pursued careers focused on social good. Benjamin was a lawyer and worked at the Buried Justice NGO. Daniel was an architect specialized in affordable housing, and Ethan coordinated social programs at the City Hall. James approached, carrying a package. "Rachel, this arrived for you today." It was a commemorative plaque sent by the City Council, declaring Rachel as meritorious citizen of the city for services rendered to the community. "Another tribute?" Rachel laughed. "I think I already have too many plaques." "You deserve every one of them," said James. "But I know what makes you proudest isn't the tributes." "And what is it?" James pointed to the activity around them. Children played on the playground built where before there was only bare earth. Mothers attended vocational training courses in the main building. Young lawyers assisted families seeking legal guidance. It's knowing that first little blue box turned into all of this. Rachel looked around and smiled. It was true. What had started as a simple attempt to plant a garden had transformed into a center for social change that benefited hundreds of families. "James, sometimes I still can't believe everything that happened." "That's how it is. When we do the right thing, the results are always greater than we imagined. And the most amazing thing is that it all keeps growing. Last week I received a letter from a city in the countryside saying they created an NGO similar to ours there. It's because you planted seeds of courage, Rachel, and courage is contagious." That afternoon, Rachel received a visit from Jessica, the young lawyer she had met years ago, who now coordinated one of the NGO's divisions. "Mrs. Rachel, I have news about that San Diego case we've been following. The case of the family that lost their home in a situation similar to ours." "Exactly. We managed to prove there were irregularities in the sale process. The family will receive compensation of $180,000 and can still recover their original property." Rachel smiled. Each victory like this renewed her energy to keep fighting. "Jessica, how many similar cases are we following now?" 43 in various cities across Los Angeles, Texas, and Florida, and we receive an average of 5 new requests for help per week. "Wow, how do we manage to handle so much?" "With the network of volunteer lawyers we created. Today we have 127 professionals who dedicate a few hours each week to help with cases like yours, all inspired by your story." Rachel was moved. The idea that her struggle had motivated over 100 lawyers to work voluntarily for social justice was something she had never imagined possible. "And there's more news," continued Jessica. "The State University wants to create an elective course called Citizenship and Access to Justice, using our work as a basis." "An entire course based on our work?" "Yes. Students will learn legal theory, but they'll also do practical work helping needy families with housing issues. It's a way to train more socially conscious lawyers." Rachel thought about how a small discovery in her backyard had transformed into something that would now influence the training of future lawyers. That evening, Rachel was at home organizing old photographs when she found the first picture she had taken of the buried blue box. It was a simple image, her holding the rusty box with her 3 young children beside her, all covered in dirt. She compared it to a recent family photo, her and James at the inauguration of the NGO's new building, surrounded by their 3 children, now adults, and some of the dozens of families that had been helped over the years. The transformation was impressive, not just physical but mainly emotional and social. Benjamin entered the room at that moment. "Mom, I found something interesting today in the NGO's archives." "What was it?" "The first note you made about the case. It's written like this: found documents in the backyard. I don't know what to do. I need to protect the boys, but I also need to do the right thing." Rachel laughed, remembering those first uncertain days. "I really didn't know what to do. I was terrified. But you made the right choice at every crucial moment." "I made the choice that seemed least wrong at the time. Sometimes that's all we can do." "Mom, can I ask a personal question?" "Of course, honey." "Have you ever regretted digging up those boxes? Of not simply reburying everything and living a simpler life?" Rachel thought for a long moment. "You know, Benjamin, in the early years I sometimes thought about that, especially during the hardest times. But today, seeing everything we managed to build, seeing how many families were helped, seeing how you three became people committed to social justice, no, I've never regretted it. And if it had been different, if everything had gone wrong, then I would have regretted not trying. I think it's better to regret something we did than something we didn't have the courage to do." Daniel arrived at that moment, coming straight from the construction site of a housing project he was designing. "What are you two talking about?" "About choices and regrets," answered Benjamin. "Oh, speaking of which, Mom, something interesting happened at the site today. One of the workers recognized me and said his family was one of those you helped about 8 years ago." "Really? How is his family doing?" "He said they managed to recover part of the money they had lost in an irregular deal and used it for a down payment on their own home. Now his son is studying civil engineering." Rachel smiled. It was always gratifying to know her actions continued to bear positive fruit in people's lives, even years later. Ethan arrived shortly after, completing the gathering of the 3 siblings. "I'm glad you're all here," said Rachel. "I want to talk to you about something." The 3 children sat down, paying attention. "You know I'm 62 now. I'm not a young girl full of energy anymore." "Mom, you're doing great," protested Ethan. "I'm well, but I want to start thinking about the future of the NGO and the center. You 3 have graduated, you have your careers, your lives. I don't want you to feel obligated to continue my work." Benjamin was the first to respond. "Mom, this work isn't just yours, it's ours too. We grew up watching you transform people's lives. That's part of who we are now." Daniel agreed. "It's true. My architecture only makes sense if it's in service of those who truly need it." "That's what I learned from you," Ethan added. "And Mom, you're not old. You're just entering the phase where you have more experience and wisdom to guide the younger ones." Rachel was moved by her children's words. "Are you sure you want to stay involved with all this?" "Absolutely," the 3 replied in unison. "Then let's plan the future. I want you to have more active roles in managing the organizations, and I also want you to start training other young people to continue the work when you no longer can." And so they began planning the second generation of the Buried Justice NGO and the Mother Hope Support Center. 25 years after the first discovery, Rachel was preparing a speech for the organization's commemorative event. The growth had been exponential. The NGO now operated in 12 American states, had helped over 800 families recover property rights, and inspired the creation of specific protective legislation in 6 states. The Mother Hope Support Center had become a national reference in serving women in situations of social vulnerability, assisting over 500 families monthly. But the statistics that made Rachel most proud were others. 89 young people had chosen careers focused on social justice after learning about her work. 34 similar NGOs had been created using her methods, and over 2,000 people reported finding the courage to confront injustices after hearing her story. During the commemorative event, Rachel took the stage to deliver the keynote speech. The auditorium was packed with over 600 people, including beneficiary families, authorities, university students, and journalists. "Dear friends, 25 years ago I was digging in my backyard to plant a vegetable garden. My only concern was saving a few dollars at the supermarket to support my 3 children. When that shovel hit the first buried blue box, I never imagined I was unearthing not just documents, but also a path of transformation that would change not only my life, but the lives of hundreds of families. Today, looking at this audience, I see faces that represent much more than numbers or statistics. I see families who have regained their dignity, young people who have found purpose in their careers, authorities who have learned to heed the people's cry. But mainly, I see proof that there are no ordinary people. There are only people who haven't yet discovered their extraordinary capacity to make a difference in the world. When I began this journey, I thought I was fighting for my family. Later I realized I was fighting for the Harrison family. Later I understood that I was fighting for all the families who had suffered similar injustices. Today I know I was fighting for something much bigger, for the right of all of us not to passively accept the injustices we witness. Each one of you here has in some way decided not to passively accept some injustice. Each one of you has planted a seed of transformation in your community, in your family, in your profession. What I've learned in these 25 years is that small, courageous acts, when added together, create giant waves of transformation. The blue box I found in my backyard contained more than old documents. It contained seeds of justice that continue to sprout to this day. My message to you is simple. Do not underestimate the transformative power of doing the right thing. You don't need to be rich, famous, or powerful. You just need to have the courage not to look away when life places an opportunity to do justice in your hands. And most importantly, never fight alone. Strength lies in unity, in solidarity, in the collective building of a fairer world. The audience gave a standing ovation for over 10 minutes. Many people were visibly moved. During the cocktail reception that followed the event, Rachel was approached by hundreds of people who wanted to thank her, share their own stories, or ask for advice. A woman of about 70 years old approached with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Rachel, my name is Antonia. My family was one of the first you helped almost 20 years ago. I wanted to thank you again and tell you something. Please tell me." My granddaughter, who was 10 at the time, was very impressed by your story. Today she is a prosecutor and dedicates her work to defending the rights of underprivileged families. She always says she was inspired by you. What a beautiful gift you are giving me, Antonia. Knowing that our struggle inspired a new prosecutor is more valuable than any official honor. A young man also approached. "Mrs. Rachel, my name is Stephen. I wasn't directly helped by your work, but your story changed my life." "How so?" "I was unemployed and somewhat lost in life when I saw the documentary about your story on television. It made me realize I could use my own hardships as motivation to help others. I went back to school, got a degree in social work, and today I work with at-risk families." Conversations like these continued all night. Rachel arrived home exhausted but deeply moved. James, who had attended the entire event, remarked, "Rachel, do you realize the scale of what we've created?" "It's hard to believe, really. Sometimes I still feel like I'm that desperate mother digging in the backyard to plant lettuce." You still are that mother. The difference is that now you're also a national symbol of citizenship and courage. You know what moves me the most, James? It's realizing that our story has become bigger than us. Even if we stop tomorrow, the seeds we planted will keep sprouting through all these people who found inspiration to make their own difference in the world. 30 years after the discovery of the first box, Rachel was in her home office, now 67 years old, writing her memoirs. The book had been suggested by a publisher who knew of her work and believed her story could inspire even more people. As she recalled each stage of her journey, Rachel was amazed by the transformations that had occurred not only in her life, but in the lives of thousands of people who had in some way been touched by her story. The NGO Buried Justice now operated as a national network, with offices in every American state. The Mother Hope Support Center had been replicated in more than 50 cities. Together, the two organizations had already directly impacted over 15,000 families. But the numbers that made Rachel most proud were others. More than 300 young professionals were dedicating their careers to social work inspired by her story. 87 municipal and state laws had been created or modified based on cases handled by the NGO, and it was estimated that over 50,000 people had found the courage to report injustices after learning of her example. Benjamin entered the office carrying the morning newspaper. "Mum, there's an article about the NGO's work in the national paper." Rachel read the article, which highlighted the social impact of the organizations she had created and mentioned that she would be honored next month with the title of Woman of the Year by a national magazine. "Another honor?" Rachel sighed. "I think I already have too many certificates and plaques at home." Benjamin laughed. "Mom, you deserve every bit of recognition, and most of all, you deserve to see that your work continues to grow even as you dedicate yourself more to the strategic side." It was true. In recent years, Rachel had gradually delegated the operational management of the organizations to her children and to the team of collaborators she had formed. Her role now was more consultative and strategic. "Benjamin, sometimes I wonder if I really deserved all this. After all, I only did what anyone should have done." "Mom, that's exactly why you deserve it. You don't see yourself as a heroine, but as an ordinary person who decided to do the right thing, and that makes your story even more inspiring for other ordinary people." That afternoon, Rachel received a visit from a documentary team from the United States who were making a film about social justice movements in Latin America. "Mrs. Rachel," said the director, a woman named Sarah, "your story reached us through the first American documentary. We were impressed by the scale of social impact that an ordinary person can have when they decide not to accept injustice. And you want to include our story in your documentary. Actually, we want to dedicate an entire episode to your story. It would be part of a series about everyday heroes of Latin America." Rachel hesitated. "Look, Sarah, I appreciate the interest, but I don't feel comfortable being called a heroine." "But why not? You transformed the lives of thousands of people." "I only did what had to be done. Anyone in my situation should have done the same thing." Sarah smiled. "Mrs. Rachel, it's exactly that humility that makes your story so powerful. You prove that you don't need to be special to make a difference. You just need courage and determination." Rachel ended up agreeing to the documentary, provided the focus was on the people who benefited and the message that everyone can make a difference, not on her as a person. The filming lasted 2 weeks. The team interviewed dozens of people whose lives had been impacted by Rachel's work, families who benefited, inspired young people, authorities who changed procedures, other activists who replicated her methods. The result was a 60-minute documentary that premiered at international film festivals and was later broadcast on television channels in several countries. The international repercussion brought invitations for Rachel to give lectures at universities in other countries. She accepted a few, always bringing James and members of the families who benefited with her. During a lecture at Harvard University in the United States, a student asked, "Mrs. Mitchell, what advice would you give to young people who want to make a difference in the world but feel powerless?" Rachel answered in Portuguese with simultaneous translation, "I would tell them to start small, in their own community. Don't try to solve all the world's problems at once. Choose an injustice that deeply troubles you and dedicate yourself to solving it. When you succeed, you'll realize you have more power than you imagined. And most importantly, don't do it alone. Seek partners, seek guidance, build support networks. Social transformation is always a collective effort." After the lecture, several students approached to ask more questions, and some even mentioned they planned to travel to America to see the work of Rachel's organizations in person. On the flight back to America, James commented, "Rachel, do you realize your story has already crossed national borders? It's surreal. When it all began, I just wanted to plant a garden to save money at the supermarket. And you ended up planting seeds of justice on several continents." Rachel laughed at the comparison, but acknowledged it was true. At 70 years old, Rachel decided to write an open letter to be published in newspapers across the country. The title was 35 Years Later, a message for those still afraid to fight. The letter said, "Dear Americans, 35 years ago, I was a desperate single mother with no money, no prospects, just trying to survive with 3 small children. When I found that first box buried in my backyard, my first reaction was fear. Fear of the consequences, fear of getting into trouble, fear of putting my children at risk. Today, 3.5 decades later, I can state with certainty, The greatest risk was not confronting the injustices I discovered. The greatest risk would have been ignoring them. Over all these years, I have received thousands of letters, messages, and testimonies from people who have faced or are facing similar situations. Many ask me how to find the courage to fight. My answer is always the same. You already have the courage. You just need to discover it. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is doing what is right despite the fear. And when we do the right thing, we discover we are not alone. People always appear willing to help. Paths always emerge that we didn't see before. In the last 35 years, I have seen families regain their dignity. I have seen young people find purpose in their lives. I have seen authorities learn to listen to the people. I have seen laws created to protect the most vulnerable. All of this began with a shovel hitting a buried blue box, an accidental discovery that turned into a conscious decision to do the right thing. My message to you is simple. Don't wait for heroes. Don't wait for other people to solve the injustices you witness. You are the heroes you've been waiting for. Each of us has buried in our lives an opportunity to make a difference. Sometimes it's obvious, like a box in the backyard. Sometimes it's subtle, like an unfair situation we witness at work, in the neighborhood, at school. Don't let these opportunities pass. Don't rebury the boxes life places in your hands. Have the courage to open them even with fear. Have the courage to do the right thing even when it seems difficult. America needs courageous citizens. The world needs people who do not accept injustices passively. You can be those people. You already are those people. You just need to discover it. With affection and admiration for all who have the courage to fight, Rachel Mitchell. The letter was republished in dozens of newspapers and websites, shared thousands of times on social media, and sparked a wave of testimonies from people who felt inspired to act in their own communities. One of the response letters that moved Rachel the most came from a 25-year-old woman. "Mrs. Rachel, I read your letter in the newspaper and cried. 2 years ago, I discovered my company was falsifying documents to secure public contracts. I was afraid to report it because I needed the job. Your letter gave me the courage I was missing. Yesterday, I filed the report with the prosecutor's office. I'm scared, but I know it's the right thing to do. Thank you for showing me that ordinary people can be brave. Julia Mitchell, no relation, but with the same last name and the same courage you inspired in me." Letters like this arrived daily, each telling a small story of courage inspired by Rachel's example. At 75, Rachel was in her garden, tending to her plants, when she received a special call. "Hello, Rachel Mitchell." "Yes, who's speaking?" "My name is Dr. Stephen Harrison. I'm the president of the National Academy. We would like to invite you to receive an honorary doctorate in social sciences from the National Federal University." Rachel was surprised. "But doctor, I don't have any formal academic training." "That's exactly why this honor is so significant. You have developed in practice methodologies for social mobilization and access to justice that have become an international reference. Your contributions to society are equivalent to those of any great academic." Rachel accepted the honor, but asked to dedicate it to all the families that had been helped over the years. The award ceremony was moving. The university president, while handing her the diploma, said, "Dr. Rachel Mitchell, you teach us that the greatest doctors are those who apply their knowledge to transform lives, not those who accumulate diplomas." In her acceptance speech, Rachel spoke about the importance of recognizing that wisdom can come from anywhere. "This honor does not belong to me. It belongs to all the people who had the courage to fight for justice, even without diplomas on their walls. It belongs to everyone who discovered that you don't need to be an academic to be wise. You don't need to be rich to be generous. You don't need to be powerful to make a difference." 40 years after the first discovery, Rachel was 80 years old and still active, although she had already passed the management of the organizations completely to her children and younger colleagues. One Saturday morning, she was organizing old documents when she found the first photo she had taken of the blue box 4 decades earlier. In the photo, she appeared covered in dirt, holding the rusty box, with her 3 small children beside her. She compared it to a recent photo, her surrounded by hundreds of people at a ceremony celebrating the NGO's 40th anniversary, with her children now adults and her own grandchildren playing in the background. The transformation was extraordinary. not just in the number of people helped, but in the quality of the social changes that had been generated. In those 40 years, more than 25,000 families had been directly helped by the organizations. 147 laws had been created or modified based on the work developed. 856 young professionals dedicated their careers to social work inspired by Rachel's story. 234 similar organizations had been created all over America and in other Latin American countries. It was estimated that more than 200,000 people had found the courage to confront injustices after learning of Rachel's example. But the statistics that made Rachel proudest weren't numerical. It was knowing she had helped create a culture in which more people felt empowered not to accept injustices passively. That afternoon, she received a visit from her 15-year-old granddaughter, Benjamin's daughter. "Grandma, I'm doing a school project on American heroes and I chose you." Rachel laughed. "Oh, honey, I'm not a hero. I'm just a grandma who one day found a box in the backyard." "But Grandma, you changed the lives of thousands of people." "I didn't change them alone, sweetheart. We changed them together, me, your family, our friends, the people we helped. Social change is always a collective effort." "But you were the one who started it all." Rachel thought for a moment. "Actually, it was your great-grandparents Edward and Margaret Harrison who started it all, having the courage to bury those documents before fleeing. And before them, other people had the courage to fight for justice. And after me, other people will keep fighting." "I want to keep fighting too, Grandma." Rachel smiled and hugged her granddaughter. "And you will, my love. Every generation finds its own buried boxes to unearth." End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this moving story and where you're following us from. Do you believe Rachel made the right decisions throughout her journey? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one.